From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. I'm Tyne Morgan, and here's what we're working on for you over the next 60 minutes. Is the summer forecast showing hot and dry? We have the 90-day. Kellogg Company is partnering up with farmers.
Without robust food systems and strong, healthy farms and farmers who can make a good livelihood, the Kellogg Company can't exist.
So why does a food company care about soil health? That's our Farm Journal report. And it's a tiny taste of the past.
The cool thing about this machine, it tells you so much about the era.
It's the bottling birthplace of Dr. Pepper with Andrew McRae. And in John's world,
bigger, beefier, battery-powered tools.
U.S. Farm Report, brought to you by the dependable, long-lasting Chevy Silverado.
Now for the news that moved the markets this week. Frost, hail, heavy rains, you name it, and the U.S. corn crop has seen it this year, and it's starting to show up in USDA crop condition ratings. Now, state by state, the corn crop is haves versus have-nots in USDA's first corn conditions report, and it's divided by the Mississippi River. Now, in the west, in the northwestern corn belt, Iowa is 73% good to excellent, Nebraska 76%, and Minnesota at 68% good to excellent. But to the east, about half of Illinois is good to excellent. Indiana is only 43%, and Ohio is 49%. Well, USDA says half of the winter wheat crop is rated good to excellent, a 2-point decline in a week. In Kansas, 45% is considered in good to excellent condition, while a quarter is in poor to very poor shape. I visited Dale Schmidt in McPherson, Kansas this week. He says that area was hammered with a lot of rain in May.
I'm a little hesitant to really put a great crop on the name. May was a lot of moisture if the fields drained well. I think the wheat has a chance of being very good. More rolling ground, probably the better if a guy's really got his fertility in line.
Schmidt says they should be in the field harvesting in about 10 days. Well, it's widespread rains stalling wheat harvest in other areas. 22% of Texas's crop is now cut, up just 2 points in a week. It's 7 points ahead of average in Oklahoma. Winter wheat harvest struggling to really get started. And in Oklahoma, winter wheat harvest struggling to get started. It's 3% or 7 points behind the 5-year average. Meanwhile, spring wheat is off to a strong start across the northern tier of states and into the Pacific Northwest. Overall, 62% is rated good to excellent, but some individual states show much stronger numbers. Look at Idaho, 3/4 is good to excellent. A third of the state's wheat is excellent. And in Minnesota, 96% of that crop is rated good to excellent. Well, as many farmers still sit on bumper wheat crop from last year, a bright spot is exports. New numbers from USDA shows the U.S. could be the world's top wheat exporter again, with shipments set to top last year by 34%. U.S. wheat set to regain that title for the first time in 3 years. A declining U.S. dollar combined with cheaper wheat is making the U.S. crop enticing. Cotton prices could take a hard fall in 2018. That's according to a new report from Rabobank. The bank says rising world production could hinder prices into the new year. That's as prices hit a 3-year high in May, skyrocketing at 14%. Meanwhile, meat prices getting a boost this spring over the scandal in Brazil, and it looks like the top officials are escaping a jail sentence. JBS, the world's largest meat packer, announcing that Josley Batista resigning as chairman and member of the board, and JBS agreed to pay $3.2 billion in fines in exchange for no jail time. Company owners and brothers Josley and Wesley Batista are currently at the center of a political crisis, alleging that they bribed hundreds of politicians and accused Brazil's president of endorsing the bribing of a witness in the country's largest meat scandal. Officials say the brothers will have 25 years to pay the $3.2 billion starting in December. Well, those are the headlines. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman joins us now with weather. Mike, our viewers trying to harvest wheat could really use some dry weather right now.
No doubt about that, Tyne. Overall, it looks like a drier week in those areas than last week. So we'll check those maps coming up. In the meantime, Drought Monitor just continues to shrink up, at least as far as the extreme to exceptional drought. That's now limited to Central and South Florida. It's even gone away in southern Georgia. Now, we do have some increasing areas over the northern plains and parts of Texas, but let's go back a month. You can see we had almost nothing through the plains. It was a little bit worse in southern Georgia and northern Florida, but as we've gone through the past 4 weeks, you can see how things have gotten better in the southeast. There are those pockets that we have to be concerned about in the far southern plains and also parts of the Dakotas. But let's go day by day this week. Monday, a storm system in the northeast. Fair amount of rain with this one. Scattered showers and thunderstorms then down through the southeast, especially in Florida, and that'll linger back into the Rio Grande area of Texas. Just a few showers with this next system. This looks like a much weaker system than we've seen recently as it moves from west to east across the country. By Wednesday, that one will be moving through the western Great Lakes, far northern Mississippi Valley, with a few scattered showers and thunderstorms, it looks like. Stationary front over Florida, causing some rain there, which is some good news, and that'll linger into the Rio Grande Valley as well. By Friday, then, that initial system into eastern Canada, lingering cold front across the southeast will cause some scattered showers and thunderstorms. This could be a decent tropical-like system hitting Florida, but that's all speculation right now. Next system, scattered showers and thunderstorms, northern plains, northern Rockies. We'll be back in our next half hour with a longer range outlook.
All right, thanks, Mike. Well, when we come back, we'll talk about the possibility of getting a rally in this corn market. John Payne and Jim McCormick join me next.
Visit FarmJournalPro.com. Trusted analysis, professional insight. FarmJournalPro.com.
Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. This weekend, I have John Payne and Jim McCormick joining me. You know, we've had some frustrated viewers. I've been talking about this for weeks, but this corn market just does not seem to respond to all this rain we've seen in the eastern corn belt. And we got our first taste of corn conditions this week. How's it looking?
Well, not near as good as I think as we were a year ago. But as you mentioned, I was on the show back in January, and we're essentially sideways from then.
Yeah.
So if you had just turned the market off and walked away, you would have essentially been in the same spot that we're in right now, given the amount of time that's passed. But I will say, you know, time is money in this market, and if you look out at some of the carries and that exist, and I'm saying some of these deferred contracts, there is value there. So looking at corn for next year, December corn is priced to be suboptimally here at say 380, 385, but July of next year is up around 415. So if we could catch a rally here, you could see that July contract maybe going to the 430s, and there's some value there for selling. So don't just look at the front month price. There's some value there down the curve.
Do you agree that we have value possibly coming down the road?
Well, yeah, I agree. My customers are definitely frustrated, but we're optimistic. If you look statistically, like John said, we've been stuck in a range about 25 cents, literally for the last 4 or 5 months. But historically, the minimum trading range we've had in the last 10 years is 98 cents. The average, excluding your extreme years, is about $1.50. So if you look at it, we're in a very narrow range. It's unprecedented. The fund's got a record short position or near record short position. We've got a crop that went in struggling in the eastern corn belt. Well, planted once, planted twice, planted 3 times in certain locations. And now we got some dryness going on in the far northern plains. I think you got the recipe for the Mark II move and move higher. And like I said, the ranges suggest it should go to the high side, we believe.
Right, and when we look at those new crop contracts and further, I mean, even to July of next year, but you know, we still have a lot of old crop out there now. So what's your advice for some of those producers that still have not done anything with their old crop?
Don't be the last one to move it. That would be my advice. I think a lot of people are sitting on a clock, kind of equated to essentially kind of a poker game in a way where there's an end date for the farmer. The buy side is going to be there. They know that the farmer needs to sell, and I don't think they're going to chase this market higher. If what Jim said happens, I think the market will rally. But in my opinion, the board is really where you want to be. I don't think the basis is going to be that much better 6 weeks from now, even if we're 50, 60 cents higher.
I agree. What we've been telling our customers, if you've got grain to move, keep an eye on your local elevator. If the basis pops, because a lot of elevators are bidding up off and on as the farmers are busy planting, take advantage to do a basis contract. Or move it completely and just consider re-owning with options. We do think we're going to get a rally, but historically, when you get these grain rallies in the summertime, the basis just widens out and the farmer really doesn't get to take advantage of it. So, you know, use these marketing tools that are out there.
Yeah. And we did, I mean, not to go back into where we were a year ago, but August 31st, we were at 320 front month. August or September contract this year, right now, we're sitting at close to 390. So we're 70 cents above on that delivery contract. So while I certainly agree there could be a lot of upside here given the weather, don't discount the fact that this market is expensive relative to the rest of the world.
Yeah, that is a good point. What about the acreage mix? I mean, you know, there's still some uncertainty around that, especially with this weather. We know that with crop insurance dates, these farmers are racing against the calendar right now, and the calendar was up for some this week. How do you think that acreage mix plays out. I mean, if we have a lot less corn acres, how's that going to impact us?
Well, I think we're looking right now at Allendale. We're going to lose 1.5 million acres of corn, we believe. Just
You think 1 million to 1.5 million?
That is what we're thinking. Now, we take that 1.5 million acres, you take 2 or 3 bushels off a trend yield, it's going to tighten that balance sheet from about a 2-3 billion carryout to maybe a 1.8 to 1.9. And that's going to get the market's attention. I mean, the funds are short, and if you got about a 1.8 carryout, you really don't have a whole lot of premium in the market. You're pretty close to value. So there's no weather premium in the market. So I think this combination of less acres, fear of yields, that's where you're going to get your rally.
All right, tighter balance sheet, but enough to really move prices substantially.
Yeah, I think it can happen. Jim's point is big. The acreage is where the shift should come from, and that's really where I think it's a little early to be betting on poor yields. I certainly think there's a lot of factors here, but the acreage shift, if we get a 2 million drop, that is, I think, the spark you're looking for. The market is very short heavy, but I'm going to encourage folks on these rallies, don't become bullish. It's fine to be bullish now, but we start creeping above $4 cash prices. I just have a hard time believing, given that we're so cheap relative to the world, it's going to have a hard time rallying.
You think so? Above 450. I mean, 449 was kind of our ceiling last year. Is it going to be even more difficult to get above that this year?
Yes, I think so, plain and simple. We've got, like John said, we're recommending, we do think we're going to get a rally, but it's a rally that needs to be aggressively marketed, both old crop and new crop. The fact of the matter is Brazil and Argentina are having a phenomenal corn crop. Their corn crop right now is about 1.6 billion bushels bigger than it was last year. Oh. So when we get a rally, we're going to be looking at selling time, but as well as the rest of the world, and they're going to slam that market. And I think that's going to put a cap on the market up near the 450 futures level, unless the weather really turns dramatically for the worse.
It's so hard not to have backdoor syndrome this year, you know, when you see the wetness in your backyard, but you're right, you've got to look around the globe. Okay, well, we have a lot more to talk about. We talked a lot about wheat in the news. We'll get into wheat prices. Plus, live cattle futures had a pretty impressive week. We'll get into what happened with that when we come back on U.S. Farm Report.
The local weather can have a big impact, not only on your day, but also on your crops. Start your day off right with your local forecast delivered right to your mobile phone. Just text Weather 6 to 31313 to get started.
Welcome back. Well, John, I mentioned cotton in our news block. Rabobank thinks that we'll have this oversupply situation with when you look at, these acres possibly could happen, and that really we're not looking at favorable crop prices when we head into 2018. What's your outlook on cotton?
Well, I certainly would like to skew the short side with them. I lived through the last 3 or 4 weeks in the front month cotton prices going to 86, 87 cents. And that scares me to get too short here, but really it comes down to conditions, the amount of acreage that we're going to get coming online, and we'll find out about this at the end of June, I think is going to continue to go up from that last March report. Conditions in Texas look great. Conditions in Georgia look pretty good right now, and those 2 states are really what you want to watch. Yeah. If they produce, I have a hard time believing we're going to be selling 72. I think somewhere in the mid-60s, and then it's about demand for next year, which I think is strong and could continue to push prices, but it's hard to store cotton. A lot of folks like to move it pretty quickly.
Speaking of demand, wheat demand has been pretty impressive. I think stats show maybe 34% above last year. Could top Russia as the top wheat exporter. Is that enough to really give us a big boost in price?
I think it's going to help give us a minor boost. I don't know if a big boost is going to in the works. There's still plenty of wheat in the world. I mean, competition is going to remain stout. The thing that's exciting about the wheat right now, that I think it's getting a lot of trade's attention, even today and yesterday, is the dryness issues in the North Dakota region. That spring wheat crop is going into some pretty dry conditions. It's in the 90s today, so they're concerned about that. Early results I've heard out of the hard red wheat, but were also a little bit disappointing. So you might have some supply issues that might give this market a little bit more of a boost higher.
John, I was in Kansas this week. I mean, overall, the crop looks pretty good, but they told me, where the water couldn't drain, I mean, the wheat is white, just disease, and says it just drowned out some of that wheat crop. So now that we are starting to see harvest and we get these results in, do you think we have any price action as we see either how good or how bad this crop is?
I think there's price action. I think the board could certainly appreciate, but the value I see is in the protein. If you've got high protein wheat, 12 plus, I'd hold on to it. I think there's going to be a lot of value and a lot of bid up for that kind of product as we get later in the year. There's a lot of poor grade wheat out there. We don't need any more of that. But high grade protein stuff that's specifically going to be missing probably up in the spring side, that's going to have some value here.
Well, looking at WASDE, hard to believe we're already talking about the June WASDE report. We talked about acreage a little bit earlier, but specifically June WASDE. Allendale came out with some early estimates. Kind of what are you thinking at this point?
I mean, we're not looking for a dramatic change in the balance sheet. We're looking for maybe the bean export number to be raised a little bit. But offsetting that, the crush. The crush has been running a little bit disappointing the last couple months, so they're pretty much going to keep the balance sheet, maybe a 10, 20 million adjustment to the upside possibly. On the beans, on the corn, pretty much relatively slight adjustments to the higher ethanol number, but the big number comes at the end of June. That's the acreage adjustment that the trade will be focusing in on.
Yeah, so WASD, bearish or bullish, you guys, what position are you taking?
I think it's going to be neutral. I think we're going to trade it next Friday, and then Mark's going to go right back to looking at summer weather. That's what we like to talk about this time of year.
All right, and the acreage, mention this real quick. We talked about corn, but soybeans, let's say we do have that 1.5 million acres go over to soybeans, and we were already seeing such a big soybean crop this year. That does not seem like it's going to be favorable to prices.
Right, beans don't have the story. They really don't. Whether it be Chinese crush margins or Brazilians crop size or now the U.S. acres, I really think beans are going to have a tough time getting up without any crop failure.
Real quick, this week saw some real life in the live cattle market. What's pushing prices?
Cash prices, demand. It's not a supply side rally like we've seen the last couple of years. There's some Indian stories, the China story, continued high cash prices. I wouldn't step over myself to hedge here.
All right, so if China comes to the market, we haven't seen any big buys. Could that even drive us even higher?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you might get some crazy looks here, but I think maybe 165, 175 on that August feeder contract. It's in the cards.
All right, thank you both. We appreciate it. We need to get closing thoughts. Let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll do that with Jim and John. Time now for closing thoughts. John Payne, we'll start with you.
Well, my biggest closing thought of the week would be in the corn markets. Use the carry, folks. If you have storage that's on farm, stop looking at that front month price of corn. Start looking at what you're going to market in March, May, beyond next year. That's where the value is. You want to sell 440, 450 corn. You might have an opportunity here if we get a little bit of a push in the front month to 4. That could put May and July upwards of 430, 440, and there's value there. And I'm telling folks we've been trading wheat very difficultly from the front of the curve in the last couple of years. Use the carry.
All right, Jim.
Well, I'd recommend for producers, come up with a game plan. Like I said, I do think we're going to get a nice rally this summer. The weather plays tend to come in, but when it does, it's going to come hard and fast. We're recommending guys make that decision now. Have your orders ready to work on the cash market as well as the futures market, so when it hits those profitable levels, you're ready to make those sales.
All right, thank you both this week. We appreciate it for joining us this first week of June. Stay with us. John Phipps joins us next.
Farm Journal TV is the go-to app for American agriculture. The best news, market analysis, and stories from rural America is now in your hands. Watch it on your phone, tablet, or desktop, anywhere, anytime. Download the app today.
For a little perspective on this first weekend of June, let's check in with John Phipps on the farm.
So, Memorial Day is come and gone. We've declared an armistice with planting season, and thanks to the overabundant rain, there is mowing to be done and more mowing. And of course, the owner of every well-manicured lawn will be firing up his or her string trimmer. This is version 7 or 8 or 12 or something for me. It's the third electric trimmer I've had after a series of gas-powered models. My success rate with those was poor. Between oil gas mixing blunders, poor maintenance, and my overall hatred of two-cycle engines, my gas trimmers rarely fired up consistently during the season, let alone between seasons. The battery versions worked, but were kind of wimpy. This year, there is an explosion of 40-volt competitors. I even saw one 80-volt brand in the box store, but it looked like a car battery on it. These more powerful versions perform as well as gas tools, at least for casual users like me. Thanks to ever-improving lithium battery technology, electric versions of all kinds of tools that used to be handled by small gas engines are proliferating and doing their jobs well. The shift to renewable power depends in large part on the replacement of fossil fuel-powered electric generation. But the transition won't just be about electric cars and coal power plants, which is the hot debate. I think our use of fossil fuels will be altered just as much by tiny consumption pattern changes by millions of consumers like me with this string trimmer. Now, if I add solar roof panels to feed a refrigerator-sized storage battery to recharge all these electric gadgets, the impact on my power bill becomes considerable. The only sad part about all this are these batteries and rechargers are manufacturer and sometimes even model and year specific designs. My collection of chargers and batteries is colorful and utterly redundant. I know we're on a big deregulating kick right now, but am I the only one who thinks establishing a standard for higher voltage batteries and chargers would be far more efficient and far less expensive for consumers. But as we found out with hydraulic hose connectors, don't hold your breath for that.
Thanks, John. Well, when we come back, enjoyment is still served up in a glass bottle, giving you a tiny taste of the past. We're off to the birthplace of Dr. Pepper later on U.S. Farm Report.
I'm a pepper, he's a pepper, she's a pepper, we're a pepper. Wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? I'm a pepper, he's a pepper, she's a pepper. If you drink Dr. Pepper, you're a pepper too. Be a pepper, drink.
From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. We have much more ahead. Are we in for a hot and dry summer? Mike Hoffman has his 90-day. From the wheat farm to Frosted Flakes, Kellogg Company is partnering up with farmers. We'll tell you why. This taste of nostalgia is bottling up memories in Texas. We're traveling the countryside with Andrew McCrae, and it's part 2 of John's discussion on Medicaid and customer support. Now for the headlines. While the eastern Corn Belt is suffocating from too much moisture, the northern plains is seeing the opposite. Weather Group says it's officially the driest May since 1984 in the northern plains. North Dakota completely consumed by drought, and it's eating into the majority of South Dakota. The latest drought monitor here shows 25% of the high plains seeing some level of drought, with moderate drought expanding to nearly 7% of the area. Drought also popping up across Texas. More than a third of the state now seeing dry conditions, a 14-point bump in a week. Now, those drought conditions could worsen over the next 30 days. NOAA's 90-day outlook doesn't show much moisture for the high plains or the western half of Texas in June, but July and August do look a tad better, with precipitation pushing above average. Now, temperature-wise, it could be a hot one later this summer. NOAA predicts above normal temperatures could surround the outer rim of the country over the next 90 days, but NOAA says their forecast is actually milder than what they issued last summer. Well, with all this talk about weather, let's go ahead and check in with our meteorologist, Mike Hoffman, who also has his 90-day forecast this week. Mike, are you thinking we turn hot and dry this summer?
Thanks, Tyne. Overall, no. Now, there will be some areas, I'm sure, that do turn hot and dry, but we'll show you the pattern coming up. In the meantime, the pattern's been kind of strange lately. We have these cutoff lows that just kind of sit in places causing rain. You can see the initial one that comes through the Great Lakes this weekend, moving into the northeast by Wednesday. Another weak one kind of dives into the east, but it's not cut off this time, just a trough by Friday into the Great Lakes from the northeast, with a cutoff coming in out west as we head into next weekend. That's still a strange weather pattern, but at least it shifts from what it has been doing. There's our June temperatures. I am going below normal for much of the Corn Belt, above normal for the west and areas south of the Rio Grande. As far as July goes, we'll shrink that below normal area into the Ohio Valley and central Mississippi Valley, otherwise above normal northeast and much of the west. And in August, we'll shrink it to take it away, basically, near normal for the Corn Belt. Other places, a lot of the rest of the country above normal. And 90-day precip, this is always tough to forecast, but I'm going above normal for much of the middle of the country. Tyne?
Thanks, Mike. Meanwhile, another trading destination may end up on the chopping block. On our partner radio program, AgriTalk, leaders at the U.S.-Cuba Trade and Economic Council telling Mike Adams that President Trump is planning to partially roll back policies softening relations with Cuba. They say this could have serious repercussions for agriculture and food finding its way to communist Cuba.
Unfortunately, the Cuban government could have done a lot more in the 2015-2016 period with the Obama administration to help U.S. companies solidify a presence in Cuba that would have made it much more difficult for President Trump to do anything.
Former President Obama softened regulations on some trade, business, and travel there. However, the 57-year-old embargo remains in place. Estimates from the Nature Conservancy show cover crops are used on less than 10% of crop acres nationwide. While it may not be a popular practice nationwide, 2 Michigan farmers are going all in and say it's already paying off. But they're ground truthing it all with the help of the same company that makes your morning Frosted Flakes. That's this week's Farm Journal report. Wading through wheat, Justin Crick is looking at one of his best crops yet.
This is probably one of the nicer fields we've ever had.
But But it's what's going on below the ground that's so unique.
You can see that how far down those roots are going.
His family's roots started 6 generations ago, with 3 generations standing on the farm today.
How long have we been underseeding clover in the wheat?
Probably 70 years.
Soil conservation is nothing new in this Michigan wheat field.
This is just really nice soil structure.
But what applications are applied and when has changed.
Our inputs have been they're more scientifically researched now.
About 70 miles northeast, Rita Herford is doing the same.
So every dot here is where they took a soil sample.
This is Herford's 6th season back on the family farm, helping raise the bar on conservation. Both Herford and Crick are doing all of this with the help of Kellogg Company.
We're in their Great Lakes Origin program, and so basically what that means is we're giving them all of our information, our crop records, so they can turn around and show the consumers the sustainability side of their farmers.
We keep track of all our inputs, our applications, and our farm management practices, and at the end of the year we are able to look back and track our sustainability efforts using certain metrics.
These farmers and Kellogg Company may have different backgrounds, but they all have the same goal: improving soil health.
That is the number one most important thing to us, because the soil is where everything happens. If our soil is not healthy, it's not active, it doesn't have plant nutrients, this wheat field will not be looking as nice as it is.
So we seek to understand what are the areas of opportunity, what are the needs, and they vary, right? What works on 1 acre doesn't work on another acre, much less state to state, crop to crop.
Diane Holdorf is the Chief Sustainability Officer for Kellogg Company. She says from farmers to consumers to even their own employees, the company cares how their key ingredients are grown.
Without robust food systems and strong, healthy farms and farmers who can make a good livelihood, the Kellogg Company can't exist.
The iconic Kellogg brand has been parked on grocery store shelves since 1906.
This has been a real learning journey for us because the Kellogg Company doesn't own farms. We don't have farmers in our business. We work with suppliers who are often 1, sometimes 2 to 3 steps removed from the farm.
Holdorf says as a company, Kellogg has a clear purpose.
We're purpose-driven, and our purpose is to nourish families so that they can flourish and thrive. And we take that to the fullest extent across our value chain.
And that starts on the farm.
We don't have full traceability. We can't because of the nature of the ingredients that we buy. We're primarily grains-based, but we can have transparency.
It's transparency playing out on farms all across the country.
I think soil health and sustainability has kind of always been a priority, but becoming involved in programs like the Great Lake Origin program, maybe it's kind of brought to the attention where we're documenting it and we're talking about it more.
Kellogg's isn't using a blanket approach on helping farmers improve production, but Holdorf says many farms have similar conservation goals.
We know that there's some key things where there's opportunities: soil health, water quality, yield potential, appropriate inputs to manage costs.
It's those opportunities helping create lofty goals for the Kellogg brand, with a commitment to sustainably source 10 of their ingredients by the year 2020.
We've quantified that to mean that we want to have helped improve the livelihoods of over 500,000 farmers.
She says they're already more than halfway there, including touching more than 350,000 acres across the U.S. But it's a journey Kellogg isn't taking alone.
We were able to get over $60 million of USDA grant funding that we could bring to 3 different regions: wheat farmers in Michigan, rice farmers in Louisiana, and then a broader national rice program that brought real money to the table.
Kellogg's also partnering up with the Soil Health Partnership to help growers discover which conservation practices are making tangible differences on the farm.
When we focus on the soil, we create greater resilience in our crop production systems.
And we're really excited about the work that we do together with farmers all across the U.S. to really reinforce conservation outcomes and make sure we're thinking about sustainable agriculture.
It's the work already going on, moving the needle to even more sustainable ag. And it's the definition of sustainable that digs deep on these farms.
Sustainability for me would be to be able to continue that and then pass it down to another generation.
To me, the real definition of sustainability is ensuring that my kids are going to have somewhere to farm. Because if we don't have land to farm on, if we don't keep that quality up, we don't have a farm.
As the mom of a little girl, it's her future that's driving her work and motivating Hereford to push the boundaries on building a sustainable future. And tune in next week because we'll learn about how the producer of Rice Krispies is helping educate consumers about how those kernels end up in those tasty treats. Well, up next, John Phelps.
Medicaid possibilities.
Your call is very important to us. Please hold.
It's round 2 of John's Medicaid Ag-splainer. For that, let's head to the farm.
Last week we looked at how Medicaid is structured, and the important thing to remember is it is a joint program between the federal government and the states, even though the federal government pays the bulk of the cost. Thus, Medicaid is administered differently across the states. This means that any changes in the future made by the federal government will have unique consequences depending on where you live. Because such changes to Medicaid funding and rules have not been finalized, only talked about, I can only outline some broad possibilities right now. First off, well, there seems to be no possibility of increased funding or coverage. Second, state budgets and politics may allow some of them to offset Medicaid changes by picking up more of the costs, but I consider this very unlikely. Third, some Medicaid cuts may be immediate, but the bulk of them will likely occur later by limiting the growth of Medicaid spending below the cost inflation for medical expenses. This is an increasingly common budgeting gimmick that postpones the pain to somebody else's term of office. One way to make such cuts is to lower payments to providers. This will likely cause fewer doctors and hospitals to accept Medicaid patients. Cuts could mean fewer applicants being accepted, causing longer wait lists, which right now the wait lists fall most heavily on disabled adults. Given the size of Medicaid in the budgets, many states will face serious deficits that will require additional state revenue increases or additional service cuts. What we don't know is which Medicaid programs and recipients will be most affected in your state. I have focused on long-term care and nursing homes. According to the administrator of our facility, Medicaid funding for the 60% of the residents there is insufficient now. And here in Illinois, those payments are running over 3 years behind. We don't know how much cost shifting can be done by nursing homes by raising private patient fees to make up for the loss of Medicaid dollars. Rural nursing homes have an additional problem here of too few local residents who can pay. The industry expects staffing levels, the nurses, etc., at nursing homes to fall. Meanwhile, cuts to programs that help seniors stay at home will add more demand for nursing home beds. Finally, this change coincides with the declining health of the enormous baby boom generation, as well as a sharp increase in Alzheimer's diagnoses. None of this is finalized. Once some of the details are known, I'll share what I think is going to happen to rural health care, especially our nursing homes.
Thanks, John. And remember, if you have questions or comments, just send a note to John via email or Facebook or Twitter. Well, up next, it's not the perfect picnic unless you serve up some ice-cold Dr. Pepper. Angela McCrae takes us to the birthplace of bottling Dr. Pepper next. Soda, pop, whatever you call it, there's a popular drink that's been enjoyed by consumers since the 1800s. Sports a unique taste, but if you're ever passing through Dublin, Texas, it's a taste of nostalgia that's bottling up memories. Andrew McCrae takes us on a trip down memory lane.
There are several soda pops still around that can trace their lineage over a century. That's the case for one well-known brand born in Central Texas.
Dr. Pepper was invented in Waco in 1885 by a man named Charles Alderton working at Morrison's Corner Drugstore there in Waco, Texas. And he made it by the glass. You would go in and say, "Shoot me a Waco." He'd mix the flavors together and give you a glass of it.
6 years later, in 1891, Sam Houston Prim bought the right to bottle Dr. Pepper and set up the first such plant in Dublin, Texas. They've been bottling soda here ever since. And in some ways, very little has changed over the years, a fact that keeps people getting their pop here.
This is our newest piece of equipment right here. It's called the Miller Hydro Model 50, and it dates back to 1965. Our oldest machine is almost 100 years old.
Kenny Horton says you don't need new equipment to bottle great soda. Their filler machine dates to 1937. The old equipment needs care, but it was built to last and has seen millions of bottles run through their system. It's a very hands-on operation, and Kenny likes to work quality control.
One of the things they force us to do is about every 3 to 5 cases that come through, we're required to grab a bottle, pop the cap, and take a drink. And if it doesn't taste good, then it's not a good product.
This plant has held on to many traditions. When most other bottlers moved from sugar to corn syrup for their soda, owner Billy Closter did not make the switch.
He stuck with pure cane sugar because of the taste. It wasn't any sort of health reasons. He just loved the way the pure cane sugar product tasted, and we realized people started coming specifically for the pure cane sugar. So it's a taste thing first.
And for many years, this was the only place Dr. Pepper was produced with pure cane sugar. Although that brand is no longer made here, they now produce a well-known lineup of sodas carrying the Dublin Bottling Works label. They have their own soda fountain where you can sit, have a pop or a float, and you can tour Mr. Closter's museum, a place full of soda pop and Dr. Pepper memorabilia. Which brings us back to that old cash register that rang up that very first Dr. Pepper over a century ago.
The cool thing about this machine, it tells you so much about the era. For one thing, the price says $7.99. That's the highest it'll go. That's why we can't use it anymore. Of course, in the 1890s, you might buy a single bottle for 2 cents, maybe a case for 15 cents. So $8 would get you a lot of Dr. Pepper back in the day.
The first soda pop rolled off the assembly line here in 1891. But a trip here is not just one down memory lane, it's actually a chance to sample some of the greatest soda still being produced. Traveling the countryside in Dublin, Texas, I'm Andrew McCrae.
Thanks, Andrew. And you can hear more of Andrew's travels on the Farm Journal radio app. When we come back, Machinery Pete has this week's Tractor Tales.
Welcome back to Tractor Tales, folks. This week we're headed to Illinois to visit my old friend Rock Ketchnig to check out his classic John Deere 4010. This Deere 4010 was purchased about 40 years ago and is the primary tractor for planting sweet corn. When it's not in the field working, this classic is showing off in local parades.
This tractor 40 years ago had a lot of work to do. It pulled a brand new 7,000 John Deere planter, 4-row, 38-inch, and covered a lot of acres. Planted all the corn, all the soybeans, and it also did a lot of hay work, mowing hay, raking, baler. It was a very main tractor. I'm very fortunate we've kept this tractor and not traded off through the years, and it'll stay here on this farm for a long time. Put some repairs into it. These old tractors hold their value, and really happy to have it around yet. It's in pretty good shape. It starts very well, doesn't use any oil. It doesn't see the use that it used to. It's pretty much a parade tractor. Probably the main function of it right now is the 4-row sweet corn planter. That's the sweet corn planter goes on it and stays on it most of the summer. We'll plant several different patches of sweet corn, so the planter just stays on this tractor. There's a lot of these tractors out there. They continue to hold their value. It's a shame that they don't make them new yet because they're one of the greatest tractors that John Deere ever produced. And I think they actually probably sell for more now than they did, of course, when they were brand new coming off the line. You can rebuild them. They're just as functional today as they were in the early 60s when they come out. Up here, we have the 4 bolts on the cowl. Middle 70s, a wonderful invention come out. It's called a planter monitor. We had flashing lights in front of us to let us know that there was seeds coming out of the tubes. We didn't have to go out and dig. And right here on the fender here are the 4 bolt holes in the fender where the AM/FM tractor radio was mounted. Pretty much standard equipment every 4020.
Thanks, guys. Well, today's Country Church Salute goes to the Bethlehem Lutheran Church located in beautiful Traverse City, Michigan. The congregation is celebrating 125 years this year. Congratulations, and our thanks to Janice Schmidt for sending that in. If you have a home church that you would like to submit, those can be sent to the address on the screen. Stay with us. We have some From the Farm photos next. Welcome back. Well, we need to start off by congratulating our June Facebook cover photo winner, Michael Klein, or also known as Precision Nerd on Twitter. He's in New Ross, Indiana, and he sent in this great drone shot, Mike. Now, we had so many good ones this month, it was really hard to choose just one, but such an awesome picture.
Jay in North Mankato, Minnesota says if soybeans could grunt like Olympic weightlifters, they would. check
You
out
just
the
made that
beans
sound effect.
pushing through the crusted soils this year. But it does look like they're grunting.
Oh my gosh, yeah, those are some powerful beans. Well, Mike, we were out on the road this week in McPherson, Kansas.
McPherson.
You have family there, right?
I have lots of cousins and second cousins,
Well,
and an aunt and uncle.
We drove by this in Hutchinson, Kansas as the sun was setting. Look at all those grain piles. It's just remnants of the bumper crop those farmers saw last year, and what crop is out of the ground so far this year, Mike. It does look pretty good.
Well, that's a good area then. And check out one of our youngest fans sporting her U.S. Farm Report hat.
Aw.
Meet Miss Claire.
Aw, so cute.
Definitely a cutie.
Yeah. All right, so your 90-day forecast, thanks for that. I mean, we've heard, it's hard really to predict precipitation and temperatures
That's
that
the
far
hardest
out, right?
part. Well, the precipitation's the hardest part. Precipitation or temperatures we feel a little more confident of, but still there can be changes, and we've been in such a weird pattern this spring that who knows exactly how we're going to progress in the summer.
No, you're right. Well, if you have any pictures or videos you would like to send in, you can do that to the address on the screen. For all of us at U.S. Farm Report, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to join us again right here next week as we work to build on our tradition. Have a great weekend, everyone.
U.S. Farm Report, America's longest-lasting news program for farmers, is powered by Ram Trucks, America's longest-lasting pickups. U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast.